Hey there, students and teachers. Welcome back to the second part of my video explaining the AP US History DBQ, going through the one rubric, 1 point at a time. In the first section, we focused on the first 2 points, contextualization and thesis, which can be scored in the first paragraph of your essay. Now we are going to look at how to score the next 3 points, which are scored by using the 7 documents effectively. And there are 3 things that we need to do with these documents. Now, first of all, you can score a point by describing the content of 3 of the documents. Then you score a second point by using 6 documents out of 7 to support an argument. And finally, using 3 documents to explain the point of view, situation, audience, or purpose of the document is going to score you the last of those 3 points having to do with the documents. So here we go. We see that we've got 7 documents and there are 3 things that can be done here. Describes, supports, explains. And I'm going to go through each of these one by one with you. Let's take a look at a document on a DBQ that I'm working on for the American Revolution. One of the documents will be a graphic source typically on a DBQ, so we're going to use a graphic source to show how we could score all 3 of those points. This is a famous engraving by Paul Revere in 1770 in the wake of the so-called Boston Massacre. Now, first of all, how would we describe this document? We score the first point by accurately describing the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Quotes are insufficient to earn this point. Now, one thing that you want to remember, don't quote documents. I know what the documents say. I tell my students that all the time. I know what the documents say. The reader is going to have read this so many times. The reader's reading the same thing all week, for a whole week. They know what the documents say. Please don't quote the documents unless it's a very brief quote. Couldn't have said it any better yourself. But you're still going to have to describe the document. This is kind of like Brick Tamlin in Anchorman, I Love Lamp. That's what you're doing here. You are showing that you actually know what the document says. You make a specific reference to the document's content. Again, not quoted. And it must be clear that you have correctly interpreted the documents that you are describing. So if you misinterpreted the document, you have no idea what's going on, you're not going to get the credit. You must demonstrate that you understand what the document is saying. So basically, 1 out of 7 points is reading comprehension and demonstrating that you understand what you've read. So for example here, I could write, Paul Revere made an engraving that depicted British soldiers firing on colonists during the Boston Massacre. Then I would, of course, parenthetically cite the document number out of courtesy to the reader. Now, we see that the document's content has been described. There you go. Do that 3 times, you score a point. The next point is scored by supporting an argument in response to the prompt using at least 6 documents. These documents should meet and exceed the standard set for the description point. So now we are using the document, not just describing it, but using it to support an argument. The documents need to be used purposefully in order to make a point. There is a reason why you're using the document, and it supports either your thesis or even any kind of valid historical argument. So if we were going to support the argument with this, we would say here, the Boston Massacre depicted in an engraving by Paul Revere outraged colonists in Boston and increased colonial resentment of the British troop presence in their city. We are using the document as evidence. Now, in my 8-month writing clinic, I'm going to take you through the specifics of how to use all of the documents. I'll write a DBQ right in front of you. Okay, so we'll go more into that, but let this suffice for now that this document is being used to support an argument. It's not just being described. Grouping is an old practice kind of left over from the old AP Euro exam. The reason I write de facto here is because grouping documents doesn't get you an actual point because you've grouped them, but I find that grouping the documents is a great strategy to make sure that the documents are being used to argue a point. So when you see 7 documents, you can typically group them 2, 2, and 3. You can say, okay, these documents address this, these documents address this, these documents address this, and having similar documents appear in a paragraph together is typically very, very helpful. Again, we'll go into those practices more in depth in the 8-month writing clinic. So a topic sentence should begin every body paragraph. And I think this is very important because it sets the stage. It shows, okay, these 3 points that I previewed in my thesis, a body paragraph is dedicated to each of those points, and the documents that support that argument are together. So as far as this goes, we need to first describe, then support, and then explain. Now, as we saw on the one rubric, if you support something, you also describe it. So if you support 6, then you also describe 3. If you are using a document to support an argument and you do so skillfully, then you automatically get the point there, okay? Because you can describe and support in the same sentence. So if you are using the documents consistently to support an argument, that's one less thing that you have to worry about. So really, instead of 7 boxes, you can look at this as 6 boxes because there's no way to earn this point for supporting without earning the point for describing. So if you're using the documents to support an argument, then you have earned not 1 point, but 2. Another thing here, use them all. Nobody's perfect, not even you. Presume that you could mess up and use all 7 documents to support your argument. Because if you use 6 and you mess one up, then you're not going to get this point for using 6 documents to effectively argue a point, and you're going to have to settle for that 1 point for describing. Even if you used 5 documents argumentatively, you're not going to get the point unless there are 6. So I always tell students, use all 7 documents in your essay. If you get all of them right, great, but at least you've got some insurance. Make sure you use all 7 documents to support your argument, with that 7th document being insurance. And finally, for at least 3 documents, explains how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and/or audience is relevant to an argument. So explaining the documents, we've got a centaur here. I just saw that. I needed something shrugging shoulders, and I saw a centaur, and I was like, that is so cool. Got to put that in there. Now, how did that centaur get there? Why did that centaur get there? Well, you know, Richie can be kind of random and quirky sometimes. That's how it got there. That's why it's there. So I'm explaining this centaur to you as it's there, okay? It was random, but that is an explanation. But when you're explaining the documents, how and or why, we are humanizing the documents, not centaurizing or anything like that, but humanizing. And as far as that goes, there are 2 methods that could be used for this. POV SAP, which used to be POV CAP, or HIP. So as far as explaining the documents, I could either use point of view, situation, audience, or purpose. Only one of these has to be used for each document analyzed. So what is it about the writer's point of view? If the writer was a Union or a Confederate soldier, if the writer was African American, if the writer was a Democrat or a Republican or a Federalist, how does that point of view impact? What was the particular situation that was around it, the context, as they used to call this, the small c context? How did the situation impact what's being written? So if you give some background, then you're able to earn that point. We say different things to different people, so how did the audience influence what is being said or written here? And finally, what is the author's purpose? What is the author trying to get done by this? And if you can do any of those 4 things, then you're good. Now, there's also HIP analysis that a lot of teachers use: historical situation, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. Again, any one of those four. Now, this is just a different way to say the POV cap, so either one of those is fine. The bottom line is that you just need to do one of these things for each document. Now, also, you can use the same one. If you always wanted to use the author's purpose and that always worked, fine. I recommend have one that's your fallback, like that you typically go purpose, unless something just jumps out at you. You typically go point of view. Have one that's your main staple, and then be willing to use the other ones if it would do better to use those, but have one that is kind of your go-to. Again, I'll explain that in more depth in the 8-month writing clinic, which is, of course, available to entire classes if the teacher purchases, or individual students. So as far as this document here, if we wanted to go into the point of view, situation, audience, or purpose, then what we would do here, first of all, we could go into the historical situation. This engraving was published in the aftermath of the Boston Massacre, in which 5 American colonists were killed by British soldiers. So we're giving some background here. Point of view. The engraving was made by Paul Revere, a Boston silversmith who was a member of the Sons of Liberty. Revere's art depicted the British soldiers lined up in formation and the colonists as helpless in order to turn the public against the British troops. Now, note here, I also went into purpose a little bit. I didn't just do point of view, I went into purpose. Now, the reader's not looking for, did purpose get used, did point of view get used? There's going to be some overlap sometimes. It's just, were the documents explained? Were at least 3 documents explained in terms of point of view, situation, audience, or purpose? So again, a little bit of overlap if we're looking at purpose and audience. Paul Revere, a local silversmith, made this in order to turn local public opinion against British soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre who were to face trial. So as far as that goes, we're taking a look at, okay, what did he, what was his purpose? And then, well, they were about to face trial. So we've got, we think about the local public. He wanted to influence public opinion. So remember, you can either use point of view, situation, audience, or purpose. Now, the reason I've got point of view in gold is because point of view is internal. That's, inside the person. What is it about the person's own situation or beliefs that influence this? And then SAP, situation, audience, purpose, those are externalities. You behave differently depending on your purpose, depending on the situation, depending on the audience. And remember, only one of these methods has to be used for each document analyzed. And again, we want insurance. You have to explain 3. I would recommend that you explain 4. You're required to explain 3, but you should explain 4 just to be on the safe side. The reader may not find all of your explanations convincing, so you want to do an additional one. Sometimes I tell students, try to explain every document that lets itself be explained. All it takes really is 1 sentence here, so why not, if you could do 5 of them, explain 5 of them, as long as it's not going to cost you time. And in the last segment, we will go into evidence and understanding. We have gotten through 5 points. We've got 2 points left to go. And again, my 8-month writing clinic is going to be great this year. Going to go very, very in-depth. But of course, I'm putting a good bit of stuff out here for free as well. So go ahead and click through to go to the next segment, where we're going to focus on evidence and demonstrating understanding. It's always a pleasure.